Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. May I have your attention, please? Shh, that always does it. Okay, we've got a full program and we want to get started. So if you take your seats, we'll get this show on the road. Good morning, I'm Tom Flavin, CEO of the Burbank Chamber of Commerce and MC for this economic summit. What I'd like to get us started is I want to introduce our 2019 Chamber of Commerce Chair, Darren Chase, to formally welcome you to the summit and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Darren?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in 2019.
You got to turn around.
Operator error. Anyway, welcome this morning, and please join me in our flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you,
All right,
Dan.
Tom, back to you.
Go ahead.
Back to you.
Did you want to do the welcome?
I did.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Okay. Thank you, Darren. Now I'd like to introduce our host today, Jeff O'Shaughnessy, store manager from Ikea. Jeff?
Welcome, as they say in Sweden, välkommen. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here this morning for this economic summit presented by the Burbank Chamber of Commerce. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Burbank Chamber of Commerce for their support throughout these past 28 years here in Burbank. Ikea cares about more than just our customers and coworkers. We also care about the communities in which we operate. Our business partners, public officials, local residents, and neighboring businesses, including other retailers. We opened this store just over 2 years ago as the largest Ikea store in North America, less than 1 mile away from the store we opened 28 years ago. Since opening our store, we are 500 plus coworkers strong, who as members of our Ikea family have access to competitive salaries, generous benefits even for the part-time coworkers, and a favorable work-life balance from the Swedish company known nationwide as the top place to work. Ikea Burbank is 456,000 square feet of home furnishing inspiration, 50 real-life room settings, 3 model home interiors, 10,000 exclusively designed products, and plenty of Swedish meatballs to go around, including our chicken, salmon, and vegetarian versions. And by the way, our new 600-seat restaurant is more than 3 times the size of the eating area in the original store. And if you have not been to an Ikea store lately, you may be surprised to see a wide variety of designs and styles, an Ikea family loyalty program, free to customers who sign up for regular discounts on Ikea family products, and promotional opportunities on home furnishing items. We have a picking and home delivery service for customers who do not have the time or don't want to pull products from the warehouse themselves. And we have Ikea branded specialty foods such as the packaged goods in the Swedish food market and much more. You will also notice that Ikea is very family friendly. We love kids and offer living with children designs in all of our room settings. And of course, we have our supervised children's play area called Small Land that replicates the look of a typical Swedish farmhouse and forest. And besides our children's Ikea department, we also have other play areas throughout the store to entertain kids who will be shopping with their parents. Ikea stores also offer similar products and layouts worldwide. And all are dedicated to the Ikea vision of creating a better everyday life for the many. In addition to economic contributions such as new jobs, regional draws, and tax revenues, this concern for others is also demonstrated by our stewardship of the environment. We strive to use materials from sustainable forests. We incorporate innovative and recycled materials into product design. We transport efficiently by flat packing furniture items. We purchase energy-efficient systems and recycling centers for our stores. We were the first major U.S. retailer to eliminate use of plastic shopping bags at checkouts several years ago. The first to phase out the sale of incandescent light bulbs. And as of September of 2015, we now sell only LED lighting and bulbs. In fact, all of this store's interior and exterior lighting is LED. And this store has over 1,900 solar panels on the roof and 6 electric vehicle charging stations in the parking area. We are proud of these efforts because the company's Swedish values result in compassion for those outside IKEA. Whether it is our commitment to sustainability, our history as the largest corporate contributor to UNICEF, or even in the local partnerships we develop. IKEA does not open stores just anywhere, nor very often. But when we do, we make a commitment for the long term as a good neighbor, a good example, and a good company. For the past 75 years, customers have been relying on IKEA at every stage of their lives. We are happy to help them do it because we strive to be the leader in life at home. Thank you to everyone for your ongoing support, and welcome to Ikea Burbank.
And I just have to say, IKEA has been a great addition to the Burbank business and civic community. It was actually my pleasure in November of 1990 to be mayor and open their first U.S. store west of the Mississippi River. Now we are the largest IKEA store in North America, and it's actually appropriate at this summit, which is focused on innovation, that IKEA is known as the most innovative company in retail. So, Jeff, thanks again for all your help, and Mary Ann and the whole team in helping us put this event together. I also want to thank our 22 sponsoring organizations, beginning with our presenting sponsor, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, whom I will be introducing in a few minutes, the Walt Disney Studios, our platinum sponsor, and Providence St. Joseph's Medical Center, our premium sponsor, along with 10 gold sponsors. Oh, okay. All right, thank you. 10 gold sponsors, 9 silver and brown sponsors, and for Hollywood Sound, a chamber member, for the technical help in making this production possible. We thank all of you because without you, this event would not be possible. Next, I would like to introduce representatives from our federal, state, and local offices, and I'm going to ask you when I introduce you to remain standing. We'll hold our applause till all are introduced. Pamela Marcello of Congressman Schiff's office, Arda Takakian, State Senator Portantino's office. Oh, there she is. Saranji Lal, Assemblymember Laura Friedman, Jason Maruka, Supervisor Catherine Barger, and from our own City Council, Mayor Emily Gable-Luddy, Vice Mayor Sharon Springer, and Council Members Jess Talamontes, Bob Frutos, and Tim Murphy. Thank you very much, and let's give them a round of applause. Finally, I would like to give you a quick overview of our program today. First, we're going to have a 2019 economic forecast from Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Second, a presentation of a vision around technology for the economic future of Burbank and Southern California. Third, the mayor of Burbank will tell us how the city supports local technology companies. And finally, a panel discussion will highlight how 5 Burbank employers are evidence that the technology future is now in Burbank. With that, it's my pleasure to report that we're ahead of schedule already, and I intend to keep us on schedule so you can all get out of here in a timely manner and get back to your responsibilities. So to get us started, it's my pleasure to introduce Ray Vasquez, Senior VP and Market Executive for Bank of America Merrill Lynch for the Greater Los Angeles region, our presenting sponsor who will introduce the 2019 economic forecast.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Tom, and thank you to the Chamber. Good morning again, Ray Vasquez with Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and I have the pleasure of being the Commercial Banking Market Executive here for the bank in the Greater Los Angeles region. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. On behalf of my colleagues who are here with me today at table 2 and 9, as well as the over 6,500 employees here in the Los Angeles area, we are delighted to be the presenting sponsor of today's economic forecast. We're grateful to the Chamber and IKEA for bringing us all together this morning to discuss and tackle some of the economic issues and opportunities that are central to those of us who work and live here in the Burbank area. I believe the findings that will be shared today will remind us of the economic power of our local market in Burbank and our region in Southern California, driving growth in key factors or sectors such as healthcare, motion picture, video production, industrial machinery, and technology, just to name a few drivers. For me, the theme of power has been on my mind recently. Over the past few months, many of us at Bank of America have asked customers, employees, and people with whom we've interacted with a simple but profound question. What would you like the power to do? Again, what would you like the power to do? There is great impact in that question. As a large global company that is rooted in local communities, we realize that the key is not our power. Instead, our capabilities are best at work when we've given our customers and communities the power to do something meaningful and lasting to them in their workplaces and neighborhoods. Here in Los Angeles, the answers I've heard from that one question have ranged from specific goals about the finances of their businesses, to goals to create more jobs, to aspirations about ending homelessness. Many of the qualities that will help us to make Los Angeles a more livable and connected place. At Bank of America, one way that we give power to our communities is through our philanthropic focus to create pathways towards economic mobility for individuals and families by addressing the need for jobs, housing, and basic needs. That is why we've been committed to the power of making a difference through philanthropy. Over the last year, we have granted over $250 million globally and over $7 million here in Los Angeles region to community involvement, including our employees who volunteered over 50,000 volunteer hours this past year in Los Angeles. We understand that our success as a company must be shared, and that growth of our neighborhoods, our customers, and our companies are all interconnected. We cannot succeed at the expense of others, which is why we are proud to partner with the Burbank Chamber and its effort to boost our local economy. So again, congratulations to the Burbank Chamber for today's event. I trust today's speakers and presenters will inspire us to ask ourselves that same question. What do we want the power to do for our communities, for Burbank and the neighborhoods that we all serve? Bank of America is proud to be working side by side with you today, and we look forward to enabling more opportunities in our community. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our key speaker in today's Economic Outlook, Barbara Bagley. Barbara Bagley is the Managing Director and the Market Investment Executive for the Greater Los Angeles at Bank of America Private Bank. In this role, she's responsible for a team of portfolio managers, overseeing their creation and management of personalized investment portfolios, incorporating a broad range of wealth solutions as well as financial planning and wealth strategy. This includes helping clients establish goals and objectives, developing an appropriate overall strategy, creating and managing solutions, and helping clients monitor progress towards their goals. In addition, Barbara helps clients navigate the changing market environments by providing guidance on asset allocation, tax minimization strategies, retirement, and multi-generational planning strategies. Barbara is also responsible for helping the market meet its investment-related goals and oversight over the overall client investment experience. In her previous role, Barbara was a senior portfolio manager working with a private bank high net worth clients, including business owners, family groups, and private foundations. Before joining Bank of America Private Bank, Barbara was a portfolio manager at Los Angeles-based independent registry investment advisory firms, including Lewis Capital Management and Doheny Asset Management. Prior to that, she was employed as an investment analyst at JP Morgan. Barbara received her BA from Columbia University and holds the Chartered Financial Analyst designation. Please help me welcome to the stage Barbara Bagley.
Okay, I'm doing okay with the sound. Okay, thank you, Ray, and to our attendees, thank you again for taking time out this morning. As Ray mentioned, my group at the private bank focuses on applying our top-of-the-house market and investment views to client portfolios, given the ever-changing nature of the economic and geopolitical landscape. In the next 15 to 20 minutes, I will provide an update on what's happened this year so far in the equity and bond markets, and then also touch on our forecast for the balance of 2019, and also discuss a few of our high-conviction investment themes. And given how fast things have been changing in the last 2 weeks, I've updated these comments frequently in the last few days, so you can be assured that they're as fresh as the food you're eating. So to start with, some background and context on the market. 5 months into 2019, through yesterday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 8.8%, the S&P 500 is up 11.9%, and the NASDAQ is up 14.3%. International markets have also done well, with the Europe, Australia, and Far East Index up 9.7%, and the Euro Stoxx 50 Index up 9.9%. China and the emerging markets posted solid returns prior to early May. However, with the collapse of the trade talks, the emerging markets index has declined 8% in the past 2 weeks. So the tariff and trade dispute is definitely having a noticeable effect on these markets. Parsing the domestic returns, despite the volatility this month, it is still a positive start to 2019. However, most of us remember that comes on the back of the steep market decline in the fourth quarter last year. From October to December of 2018, the S&P posted a negative 14% return. It was one of the worst returns on records. In fact, as many of us in the investment community recall, as bad as it was, in 10 years during the financial crisis. The fourth quarter of last year was dominated by concerns about an overly aggressive Federal Reserve Board, coupled with the fractious U.S.-China trade dispute dialogue. After the sharp market decline in December, Fed Reserve Chairman Powell, he hinted at an economic conference on January 4th, earlier this year, that further rate hikes were off the table. This has become known as the Powell pivot. Both the equity and bond market responded in positive fashion, with equities delivering 13% return for the first quarter, and the 10-year U.S. government bond yield dropping from 2.7%, where it ended last year, to 2.5% to close the first quarter. Now, since the first quarter, the 10-year Treasury has actually dropped another 25 basis points as the trade tensions flared up. Last night it closed at the yield of 2.26, which is a 2-year low. And this is in the face of an improving economy domestically, so it's sort of quite dramatic that yields are where they are. Without getting too far into the technicals, the current shape of the yield curve is flat, meaning that, short-term rates and long-term rates are basically the same. That's good if you're refinancing mortgages, maybe not so good if you've got credit card balances and you're trying to pay off some sort of short-term debt. Basically, we believe the shape of the yield curve reflects the fact that the market's got concerns about future GDP growth, and the Fed is going to need to ease in order to counteract this anticipated slowdown. In fact, the bond market is anticipating a rate cut in the second half of this year, due to the persistently low inflation figures and concerns over our trade policy. While the dialogue with China has received most of investors' attention, tensions with Iran and concern about European growth are impacting the yield curve as well. Even with our record low Treasury yields, U.S. government bonds compare favorably to those of other developed nations, such as Sweden, Switzerland, Italy, and Japan, and Germany, a lot of which have negative yields. Earlier this week, for example, the German 10-year government bond yielded negative 16 basis points. Japan's 10-year government bond yielded negative 8 basis points. So the concept of negative yields, at which point the investor is actually paying a premium to the government to hold their money rather than receiving interest, that's quite an extraordinary concept, but it's now rather commonplace in Europe and Japan. So again, it makes our bonds look relatively attractive, even yielding 2.26 for a 10-year. A few more words on inflation before getting into our forecast for the balance of 2019. As most of you know, the Federal Reserve Board has a dual mandate of managing employment and inflation. With the lowest unemployment in decades, many investors assumed wage inflation would work its way back into the system. So far it has not, and the overall inflation has undercut the Fed's stated target of 2% for the past 11 years. Again, we haven't had that 2% inflation target for 11 years. So in other words, the Fed's focus on inflation was misplaced in our view. We believe the Fed raised rates 2 times too many in 2018, and the sharp sell-off in the fourth quarter conveyed the market's message on this point. So with the Powell pivot in January, the Fed's actions have become more predictable this year. However, the ongoing trade tension between the US and China has led to great uncertainty for global trade and has been the cause of the 6% market decline this month. The equity market hit an all-time high on April 30th, based on optimism about a quick resolution to the US-China tariff dialogue. That optimism proved unfounded as both sides have retreated and remain at odds at major negotiating points regarding intellectual property and technology transfer. In early May, the Trump administration announced a tariff increase on $200 billion of Chinese goods, with the tariff rate rising from 10% to 25% after the talks broke down. In retaliation, China announced that it would increase tariffs on $60 billion of US goods, with the rate going from 5% to 25% effective June 1st. The markets have been in decline since then, with a 6% decline in the S&P 500 in the last 2 weeks. The trade spat has become objectified by the isolation of Huawei, China's largest telecom operator. Essentially, the US has prohibited US suppliers like Google from providing software upgrades for Huawei's phones. Ultimately, we think a compromise will be reached, but in the interim, it has created a very tense trade standoff, with technology firms doing business with China having declined much more than the overall market. While the tariff discussions touch on many different industries, from retail to agriculture, including a lot of attention on the Midwest and the soybean production, because China has been one of the greatest markets for that. At the end of the day, we believe the trade negotiations are a strategic way to address the issues of intellectual property and technological dominance, starting with a focus on 5G. Although the US and China are still at odds, ultimately we do see resolution. The uncertainty over trade policy has unsettled global markets. We estimate the trade war results in a decline of 0.2% to GDP every 2 months. Thus, a 6-month delay in resolution could clip US GDP by 0.5%. Headed into another election cycle later this year, we expect the Trump administration to be sensitive to the potential negative impact on the economy. China is retaliating as well. There are reports of increasing anti-US sentiment and the potential for boycotts of US products in China. We view tariffs on Chinese imports negatively. The New York Fed study estimates that tariffs will cost a typical US household $831 annually. We note that another potential negative, auto tariffs with imports from Europe, has actually been put on hold, demonstrating that ultimately compromise is necessary to maintain positive economic momentum. With regard to the US-China trade dispute and its impact on further growth, we believe there are 4 scenarios that will play out over the next 12 months. I'll outline each of these scenarios for you. First is the optimistic scenario, which is continued US GDP expansion. This is quite possible if a surprise trade deal emerges, perhaps at the G20 next month in June, and this will help lift business confidence globally while the Fed stays on hold. The next scenario would be moderation. So in this scenario, geopolitical risk from China and other regions weighs on confidence and growth, but an easy rate policy balances it out. We believe this scenario would incorporate an agreement to meet and discuss trade policy and perhaps a framework, even if no definitive solutions are provided. The third scenario would be contraction, and that's what the market's focused on right now. Global trade is pressured and business confidence recedes, creating a mild contraction. However, the service economy is still in good shape, and that provides a bit of a sort of a balancing act so it doesn't become a severe recession, which is potentially the fourth scenario, and one we don't think will actually happen, but it's something to keep in mind. In the recession scenario, a full-blown trade war ensues and goes on for an extended period of time. This includes tariffs on all goods, boycotts and blacklist items, and an escalation of national security interests. Falling business confidence leads to a major decline in consumer confidence, which in turn leads to a drop in spending. And thus, the Fed would be on hold for several years, which essentially the bond market is sort of intimating that's a possibility. Again, that's not our base case, but it's something to keep in mind, and the market's occasionally going to flare up and project this type of nervousness. Ultimately, we believe that some combination of these scenarios will develop, or threaten to develop at different points during the negotiating process, which really, is probably not going to wrap up in June. It may be several more months of negotiations. Our base case is that a combination of scenario 1, expansion, and scenario 2, moderation, will emerge in the end. So positive growth, but very mild. Both the US and China need a rising growth story as the US election cycle approaches and China's domestic economy needs support. China's already provided a lot of stimulus to their domestic economy as their growth rate has slowed to about the 6% range. Still really impressive for, one of the largest economies in the world, but it slowed from 8%, and they still have, a lot of the population wanting to move into improved standards of living. So, it's in their interest to provide this support, and, it helps them to trade with us. A further drawdown in the domestic equity markets, mixed with visible evidence of the trade war negatively impacting growth, could prompt both sides to meet and rework a trade deal. So in the current month, though, scenario 3, contraction, is basically what the markets are starting to price in. Given the stalled dialogue, we acknowledge that negotiating from this position is difficult and requires considerable skill and flexibility. We continue to believe a trade deal will emerge by year end. However, the process is likely to be long and drawn out with further twists and turns. So with all this, are we still constructive on growth this year? We are. We do remain constructive, in large part because of consumer confidence and small business confidence. Both were strong through April. First quarter GDP was a strong it was actually revised from 3.2% this morning. It was announced at 3.1%. Still very impressive. Inflation remains very low, below 2%. Unemployment's at historical lows as well, below 4%. And productivity growth, which was missing for the last couple years, has actually expanded at a 2.4% rate. That's a positive. It helps keep wage inflation contained. Our forecast for the 10-year Treasury was initially 3%. My guess is that we're going to revise that lower. I don't know if the slide's up. I think it says 3% somewhere on the slide, but I'm expecting that to go down. Right now, again, the 2 years yielding about 2.7. Let's see. Given the low unemployment and moderately rising wages, the U.S. consumer remains in good shape. And the consumer, as you know, is the bellwether of our economy. They account for about 70% of GDP still. So far, these are all positives. However, we acknowledge profit growth is slowing, and the various geopolitical tensions will compress valuations. Heightened tension with Iran, in addition to the trade issues with China, are overhangs that need resolution for the market to surpass its previous highs. For 2019, our view is that the S&P 500 will reclaim the 2,900 level. That's up another 6-7% from where we are now. However, we note that since we reached this level twice last year, and we were there and again in April, we're basically looking at a range-bound market. So we need earnings to stabilize, and that'll enable us to move back to our highs. However, again, that's assuming the trade dialogue with China approaches resolution. The domestic markets are likely to stay range-bound despite positive GDP. We expect the dollar to stay range-bound as well. A strong dollar ultimately clips profit growth as it makes U.S. goods comparatively more expensive. After a dollar rally in 2017, we see the currency as fairly priced. Turning now to some of our high conviction investment themes. One of the main themes is technology, in particular 5G, which is the next generation cellular network technology which enhances broadband access. 5G is squarely in the middle of the trade dispute with China and is objectified by the U.S. isolation of the Chinese telecom giant Huawei. 5G is important because with it, the amount of data traffic moving across the global networks is forecast to explode at a 31% annualized rate. Video is expected to account for over 75% of the growth in global mobile data traffic. 5G will provide critical supporting infrastructure as consumers move towards more bandwidth-intensive products. 5G is a technology that enables adoption of many of the long-term secular drivers of the U.S. economy. And that's why we believe that there has been so much focus on technology and intellectual property in the midst of these trade dialogues. So here are a couple of the high conviction themes. None of these, I think, will be new to most of you, but they're the ways that we're trying to incorporate these secular trends into the client portfolios by focusing on companies and strategies that maximize these areas. The first is big data and artificial intelligence. The gist of this is that big data creates the need for data analytics and interpretation. The greater amount of data, the more likely it is for artificial intelligence to overtake humans for routine tasks. Here are a couple of interesting statistics. By 2025, people will interact with connected devices once every 18 seconds, 4,900 times per day. The number of connected devices will rise from 18 billion to 34 billion by 2025. The Internet of Things, also known as IoT, which is machine-to-machine communication, is expected to continue to grow. A recent example of that is McDonald's recently purchased a company whose software can be installed in the drive-thrus. The software has the ability to adjust the menu based on the weather, the number of passengers in the car, the time of the day, etc. In theory, the orders will become more customized and more sort of sensitive to who's in the car without any human intervention. Another example is the connected home. An owner could monitor the heating, the air conditioning, security, etc. from afar using their mobile phone. This is already rolled out with a number of security products, and some of the small electronic component makers are adding these features as well. Factory automation is another trend. This is all driven by software and semiconductor chips, as well as small robots, some of which I think are on the floors here. A lot of the cleaning and sort of the maintenance jobs people are adapting robots for this use. We've seen voice and facial recognitions at airports, and we expect this is going to continue to grow. Some of our bank cards use the thumbprint, and we think that iris scanning is going to become more prevalent as well. So content explosion is another one. Here we are in Burbank, so obviously you guys are all touched by the Disney, Hulu, and Comcast agreement. Just on my way over here, I passed Warner Brothers, Melody, Nickelodeon, and just a number of huge brand names that are increasing content exponentially. Expanding bandwidth means more content creation for more devices. There's a great interview with Bob Iger yesterday on Star Wars Land, and I'm looking forward to taking my kids probably in the next, next month or so. I think it's going to be pretty crowded. But basically, these are immersive experiences, and you can take the experience everywhere. It can start out as a physical experience and then go on to be a social experience over your devices and continue. Kids meet each other this way. I think parents debate the benefit of things like Fortnite, but I mean, kids have talked to other kids all over the world and playing some of these games. Digitization of content will continue. Esports is huge. That's continuing to eat up bandwidth, both on mobile devices and in the home. A third theme is the aging demographics. Between now and 2050, the world's silver generation, those aged 65 and older, will increase by over 885 million. Home health care is needed for those who wish to age in place, and that is going to involve smart homes, as well as attendants, as well as wearable devices. So the idea of using a wearable device like a watch, or perhaps a hearing aid or a pacemaker, that will ultimately be able to track the health of the person and communicate it to the physician, that can have a huge impact for a person living alone or without family members in the nearby area. We also expect more real estate to be devoted to senior housing. All of this will be driven by personalized medicine and genomics advances. Another theme is electronic vehicles and the mobility revolution. The number of electronic vehicles is expected to double in the next 3 years, and that's referring to just cars. Bikes and scooters are also on the rise. Ride-sharing services and autonomous vehicles continue to proliferate. Over 90% of new cars sold in the developed markets will be considered connected cars by 2020. So that's going to give us a treasure trove of data on driving habits, destinations, average distances, etc. And again, we'll be able to tailor the car or the machine to the individual driver or to the individual family or neighborhood that needs to get someplace. So mobility will change a lot. We're also expecting drone delivery for the last mile. The last mile has traditionally been the trickiest part of the delivery. You know, we can get the products to IKEA, but how do you get them from IKEA to our homes or from the grocery store to our homes? So that last mile has been very tricky. We expect some advances in that, and a lot of the large retailers are trying things out now. Another major theme is cybersecurity. 20% of US households own at least one smart speaker. So this is leading the transition to an always monitored and always connected home. Cybercrime damages will cost the world $6 trillion annually by 2021, up from $3 trillion in 2015. And worldwide spending on security-related hardware, software, and services has increased by 10% in 2017, reaching $91.4 billion in 2018. I can tell you that at Bank of America, we take cybersecurity extremely seriously, and it is one of our biggest budget items on an ongoing basis. We've had really interesting presentations on cybersecurity, both to existing clients and customers, and also to internal groups like mine, just so we're aware of all the things the bank is doing. It is a constant battle. I'll tell you, it's grown as a part of, I think, every company's budget. And lastly, the last kind of an important theme, and kind of touching back to what Jeff kicked off on with IKEA, is environmental sustainability, waste and recycling. 2 tons of waste is generated in a year, amounting to a footprint of 0.74 kilograms per person per day. Clean energy, equipment and infrastructure, battery suppliers, and energy efficiency, waste management, sustainable packaging, all of these are critical things to think about as we move ahead. We're going to have to find new uses for waste. We're not able to export as much of it as we used to. So we want to both recycle and reduce. At Bank of America, we have a focus on sustainability, and we also have certain strategies within our portfolio group that focus on companies that have positive sustainable practices. We think ultimately it's important not just for the environment, but for companies' profitability, because it is important to reduce waste. And there's many ways of doing it. Just for example, in our office, we have about 25 people sharing one printer. And it not only gets you up out of your seat to go over to the printer and pull your document, but it does make you think twice about printing because you've got to go take that walk. So I think the environment is going to be something that comes up more and more often as part of kind of corporate dialogue with customers and internally. So these are some of the major trends. We think despite the overhang with China and the trade dispute, these are things that are keeping our economy growing in a positive secular direction. And we're all excited for the potential of what they hold. As we balance the market environment with these opportunities, we're looking to position portfolios for adaptation and resiliency. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'll now turn it over to our next speaker for a more in-depth view on the technology impact locally. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ray and Barbara, and Bank of America Merrill Lynch for that presentation. I was particularly interested in the themes. New technology is going to be impacting us big time in communications, healthcare, manufacturing, security, so many different areas. And fortunately, that's what you're going to hear a lot more about today. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce a vision of the economic future for Southern California and Burbank. It's called Stars Aligning, how Southern California could be the next great tech ecosystem and what your community can do to make this a reality. The Boston Consulting Group did the study in partnership with the Alliance for SoCal Innovation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Andy Wilson and Eric Ide. Maybe Andy, you're going to introduce Eric, to make the presentation of this particular study. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. As Tom mentioned, I'm Andy Wilson. I'm the Executive Director for the Alliance for Southern California Innovation. Welcome. We're pleased to be here. And Barbara, thank you for setting the context, kind of the global context. And I think the flow is, I see it today, is you think of the big picture, and you think about the global context, and really question what's happening in Southern California. So we hope today to bridge that gap, that conversation from the macro to the regional, and then set up a conversation. I think Tom has a great panel later today around local business leaders, and I think this will be helpful in that. So we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. I have to call slides. There's no clicker, so next slide, please. So agenda today, a little introduction on the Alliance. We're a new not-for-profit. I'll talk about that. As Tom mentioned, we are going to review the work that Boston Consulting Group did for us. We are a not-for-profit organization, and we're very pleased to be strategic partners with Boston Consulting Group. They give us about $2 million a year of strategy and policy work for free. So if you're running a not-for-profit, having a partner like that's super valuable. So we're going to share some of that work. And then we're going to bring it down, and Eric, who's our Director of Ecosystem Development, will really start sharing some frameworks that can be taken locally to your own hometown. What can we do? This is great, but what do we do operationally to bring it to life? And then I happen to be from Pasadena, and we've done some work there. I thought I would share with you a case study around some of the work that's happened there, and more importantly, some of the impacts that have occurred, and hopefully that will stimulate some action here in Burbank, because we think everyone can be proactive. Next slide, please. So the Alliance is really focused on Southern California. You'll see in some of the materials I share with you that we live in an extraordinary place. I think we're all biased in this room, but we think Southern California is a phenomenally compelling area for innovation in technology. It's very diverse, which is a good and a bad thing sometimes, and we think there's a way with some strategy to bring that to life. And we're really focused on bringing innovation and breakthrough technologies to the world at large that creates ultimately jobs. So that's kind of what we're up to at the Alliance. Next slide, please. Our team, you'll see some of us here, we're very fortunate. If you don't know Gene Sykes, he's our board chair. He helped bring the LA 2028 Olympics to Los Angeles, he and Casey Wasserman. He runs, co-heads investment banking for Goldman Sachs. They're important partners of ours. I know Disney and Warner Brothers are on the panel today. The Chief Information Officer of the Walt Disney Company is on our board, and the EVP of Strategy and Digital for Warner Brothers is on our board. So we're lucky to have a lot of key leaders in Southern California involved in our effort. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to double click on this slide today because you're going to get a lot more about this. But when you do an inventory of what are the assets you need to have a compelling innovation ecosystem, Southern California really is an extraordinary place. We have an aggregation of the top research universities. We create more intellectual property in Southern California than Northern California. We create more STEM students, and the list goes on and on and on. And I think our call to action really is, how do we put those assets to work? I almost think about this as a recipe. You have all the ingredients on your counter, and they don't do anything unless you put them together and create something compelling. So our mission at the Alliance is, what can we do as a region, and what can you do locally to put those ingredients together to create something compelling? And so we think the time is now for Southern California. I should confess, I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is my first not-for-profit. And one of the things you learn in the world of innovation in starting companies, the right idea is important, but the right idea at the right time is even more important. So we think the timing for Southern California is exactly right. And in part of it is what we have done is a region has started to kind of coalesce. Those building blocks have started to formulate themselves. But equally important, our friends in Northern California have reached kind of an inflection point, a saturation point. And we think that creates an opportunity for us, that some of the attention around innovation is no longer being kind of sucked up exclusively in Northern California, and that opens an incredible window of opportunity for us in Southern California. Okay? Next slide. I'm not going to bore you with this slide, but this is kind of the activation strategy that we've come with for the Alliance. So every entrepreneurial venture starts with a bold idea. And our bold idea is that we're going to bend the curve on innovation and economic development in Southern California. And B of A, that's probably what you guys think of every day. We are a 6-person not-for-profit, and we're going to try to do something as bold as bending the curve on innovation in Southern California. Some would argue that maybe we're spending too much time at the legalized cannabis shops to think that we can actually do that. But I think there is actually a way for us to make a difference. And let me just touch briefly on that. And the reason I share this with you is the Alliance is really a resource for everyone in this room. Right? Think about us as a not-for-profit kind of thought partnership and a catalyst for taking action around bringing innovation resources to light, okay? So this first corner that we call around It's kind of our FIND program. So we think fueling innovation through the development of nodes or clusters, right? And I think this is one of the things you'll hear in our conversation, and it's kind of the challenge and the opportunity in Southern California. It's not one place. It's a network of in clusters or communities, and it's that network that's the power of Southern California. And so we have to acknowledge that our geography and the economic landscape of Southern California is very different than what you see in New York. It's very different than what you see in San Francisco. It's very different than what you see in Boston. In many ways, we have to take the models that work there and then localize them to the way our economy works here. Okay, until you come to reconcile that, we will never have success. So part of our strategy is recognizing that the topography of innovation and economic assets here is uniquely distributed and frankly highly diverse. Okay, so this idea of building innovation through activating communities is really foundational to our work, and Eric's going to share more of that today. Just two other things. We're bringing capital, and you'll see in the assessment that BCG did is that there's a lot of startup companies in Southern California, a huge number, almost as many as Silicon Valley and New York. A lot of them get started, then they kind of top out. They struggle to get through the institutional financing round. They get seed funding and angel funding, and then there's not enough late-stage capital. So we think there's a need to reconcile that problem. And then finally, we think as we work and build these innovation communities, we need to work together as a network, a connected network. I think of Southern California is like a mosaic. Like there are these wonderful, beautiful tiles that represent communities like Burbank and Pasadena and downtown, but we need to put those tiles together so that they come together in a compelling kind of integrated composition, right? So part of our work, I think at the Alliance, will be bringing those communities together, and we're fortunate to have partnered with the Milken Institute to do that. And I assure you that many people in this room will be invited to some of those convenings later this year. Next slide. So our goals at the Alliance are three things. Is to increase startup density. I don't know, do we have any entrepreneurs in the room? People who've started companies? Right. How important is it to be in a community of entrepreneurs to be successful? That context of which you build companies is mission critical. So we think having density is critically important. And it's challenging in a place like Southern California where we're so spread out to create density. So we got to figure out how to kind of cut that Gordian knot and create density. Building and addressing some of the challenges in Southern California. So as examples, if you are an innovation company in transportation or in clean tech, and you tell them you're in Southern California, most people don't believe you because they think Southern California is Hollywood, Disney, Warner Brothers, but our economy is so much richer than that. And as much as we look at those industries as beacons for us, we all are better served by extending that narrative so that innovation has more aspects to it that reflect kind of diverse nature of our economy. So we need to work on our brand for Southern California innovation. STEM students. We have 1.2 million people in higher ed in Southern California. We produce more STEM graduates in Southern California. You go to Disney, and we know the CIO of Disney, they're struggling to find engineers. How ironic is that we produce so many great, talented students, and we can't keep them here. So we think that's kind of a regional problem. So one of our challenges and one of the things we want to work at is how do we address those regional challenges. And finally, it's about creating great companies. If you create great products, Ikea is a great product, you create great jobs, and you create great quality of life. So those are really kind of our missions. Next slide, please. And it's all about jobs. So this is kind of a metric we think about. So today in Southern California, we receive about 7% of the amount of venture capital as the Bay Area. Okay, if we can take that 7% and get it to 30%, a third, 33%, that would create $30 billion of new direct investment in Southern California. There are 200,000 direct jobs in the tech industry and 1 million jobs through the multiplier effect in Southern California. So this is about high quality job creation. And I think about quality of life and how expensive it is here. If we can create great jobs, that's just as powerful as it is to create more affordable housing. Let's create jobs where people can afford the housing. We also need to create more affordable housing. So I think quality job creation is very important. So enough on the Alliance. Next slide, please. So Tom asked me to talk about the BCG report around stars aligning. And as you can imagine, if anyone's hired a BCG or McKinsey, they love data. So get comfortable to see lots of data. We're happy to make this presentation available for those of you who maybe can't digest the data as quickly as I'm going to share it with you. And that's the report, and that's the URL, but you can search it on Google, Stars Aligning BCG. Next slide. So when you think about ecosystems, go back to that analogy of cooking. What are the ingredients you need? Okay, so the first thing BCG did was do 100 interviews with people who are experts on building innovation ecosystems. And they came up with 6 key ingredients, okay? And so I'm going to click through these quickly, but human capital. Do you have the talent? Do you have the entrepreneurs? Right, no innovation if you don't have talent and entrepreneurs. Financial capital, we talked about that a little bit earlier. University system. We have the finest university system in the country in Southern California. I'm fortunate on our board of directors, we have the 6 vice chancellors of the UCs in Southern California. We have Caltech, we have USC, and if you look at that network of research universities, they control $8 billion of research a year, okay? They generate over more than 1,000 patents a year. Incredible asset in Southern California, okay? So we do really well, and I'll share a little bit more with that. Corporate environment, we'll touch on that. We have some great corporate representation here today. Infrastructure. Do you have the supporting organizations, the incubators, the angel funds, the co-working space? Saw a very cool co-working space on the way over here, as I just drove in. I don't know if that's new, but that's exciting to have in your community. And then finally, is there a culture to pursue innovation? So that's kind of the framework we used. Next slide, please. So you have to digest this really quickly. No, I'm kidding. This slide, when I tell people, this is a classic BCG slide, and what I would ask you to do is just squint and look at the colors. Okay, so green is good, yellow is okay, and red's not great. So when you look at this, you can see New York, Austin, Israel, Boston, Bay Area, and SoCal. So when you look at human capital, financial capital, and university system, we score really well. And in the other areas, we score okay. And when you look at these relative to that peer group, we're a very strong number 3 and on our way to number 2. So when you think of global ecosystems, Southern California has a lot of the assets to really be a powerhouse for innovation across the world. Okay, so this is a little bit of, this is the good news. Next slide. When I mentioned startups, so this is how many startups were venture funded over the last 5 years. So not surprisingly, Bay Area, 7,200, New York, 4,600, Southern California, 3,200. That's about 600 companies a year. Guys, no problem in creating startups. Southern California really has a great culture for people who want to break out and do their own thing, right? We're the land of kind of the creative and the people who feel empowered. So we do great there. Next slide. This is a little bit hard. This is venture capital. And the blue bars, for those who can't read them, the arrows point to Los Angeles. And this is how much capital has gone to those areas over the last 4 years. So 10 billion LA, 7 billion San Diego, 2.5 billion Irvine. So about $20 billion. That's a lot of capital. Actually, last year it was $6 billion in greater LA, so a nice uptick. But when you compare that to San Francisco and Silicon Valley together, they're about $100 billion. That's where most of the venture is still going. I'm happy to report that the venture community in Southern California continues to develop very nicely. We just did an inventory. There are more than 100 seed funds in Southern California. And I'll call those as early stage capital that manage less than $50 million. The problem is there are only 6 funds that manage more than $100 million. So we really get companies jammed up, getting through kind of the startup phase into kind of out of the house and through the college years, to use that analogy. Next slide. And this maybe articulates that better. So the blue is the Bay Area in terms of dollars. In the black is SoCal. So in the early stage, about the same amount of money goes to early stage companies in Southern California as Northern California. And then guess what happens? You see this kind of compounding effect. And if you don't have late stage capital, guess what? You don't build unicorn companies, you don't build the next Ring, you don't build SpaceX. You got to have capital at later stage in the ecosystem. Maybe B of A can help us on that. So we see a real discrepancy in capital availability in the late stage. Next slide. This is another way to look at the capital flow. We are by far, Southern California is the largest importer of venture capital from outside our geography. So every dollar of VC that goes into a company in Southern California, $7 gets imported. So we have the worst balance of trade, so to speak. The good news is the companies are so great that people are willing to put money in companies. The bad news is it's a lot harder to attract it, and the great companies, if they're successful, the returns go to the VC out of the Bay Area because their limited partners and general partners are on Salem Hill Road. They're not here in Burbank. Okay, so we got to figure out how to get more capital in Southern California. Next slide. I mentioned intellectual property. The two in the middle are the yellow are San Diego and Los Angeles. If you add Orange County, that's another 100 patents generated a year. So we actually are very prolific in the creation of intellectual property, which is the seed of any great innovation company, is some sort of new innovation that could be protected. So a great job, intellectual property. Next slide. College students. We produce 1.2 million people who are in higher ed every year, neck and neck with New York City, right? So no shortage in talent. Of course, the challenge is keeping the great talent down here. I helped a kid who was getting his engineering degree get three internships in Pasadena because he wanted to work close to home. And then they got the job offers, and guess what? He went to Apple. Kind of pissed me off. But anyway, we have to have kids who are taking these jobs that think that Southern California is a legitimate place for them to create innovation jobs and careers. And I can tell you that's one of the reasons that Warner Brothers and Disney is very interested in our work, is they see themselves as much as innovation and technology companies as they do as content companies. And if they can't access the innovation and engineering talent, it's going to be hard to compete in some of the areas you talked about around VR, AR, high definition digital entertainment requires a different skill set, not so many screenwriters and actors, okay? So lots of talent here. Next slide. Corporate presence, 17 large Fortune 500 companies in Southern California. It's the left bar, 36 in the Bay Area. You see some of the ones in Southern California. We do not do well there. It's funny, like when Eric presents, you'll see like Warner Brothers doesn't show up being headquartered here because it's now part of AT&T. We do a great job creating great companies, but they don't keep their headquarters here. And we think that continues to be a challenge. And I know we're all aware of that, but that's just the reality of the beast. Next slide. This really talks about all the services that you need to build an innovation economy. And I'll just keep it short. We actually have great co-working spaces, law firms, venture funds, so the infrastructure is here in Southern California to support the innovation ecosystem. Next slide. Interestingly enough, this is actually work by CBRE around what it costs to operate a company. And I always, this is hard to believe, but if you look at New York, San Francisco, DC, Seattle, Denver, and Los Angeles, and you look at the life cycle cost of running a company, including employment, Southern California is the least expensive of those cities. Not cheap, but still the least expensive of those cities. Next slide, please. We talked about density being a challenge, right? I think of my service area, Ray, I don't know what yours is, but mine's 10,000 square miles. It's 20 million people, right? And it's 15, 14 different clusters. It's just very spread out. So when you think about density, it's hard to achieve. So when you look at tech companies per square mile, right, it's not very dense. When you look at IPOs, you look at value of IPO creation, it just says that because our geography is so big, it's hard to get that critical mass, and we just have to acknowledge that's the nature of the beast. Next slide. And this, to me, is probably the most important slide in the presentation, is we looked at, with BCG, they did heat mapping of Southern California innovation assets. They looked at innovation jobs, startups, flow of capital, IP creation, and they created a map of where the hotspots are. If you feel heat coming through your shoes, it's because Burbank Glendale is one of the hotspots as an innovation center in Southern California. So is downtown. So is Irvine. Interestingly enough, Eric and I are going out tomorrow to Riverside. If you're interested in ag tech innovation, incredible innovation going on there. The problem is it's not monolithic, and we can't characterize it as one thing and happening in one place. And I think one of the disservices we do ourselves is we talk about SoCal as if it's one place and it's all homogeneous, because we're kind of lazy, but it's really a network of an extraordinarily interesting places that have compelling stories to tell. And when you add up those stories, it creates a Southern California story, okay? Next slide. So how do we take advantage and how do we kind of tackle some of these challenges? Venture capital, we need to attract capital. Ambitions, we have a lot of people who start, but they don't shoot for the moon. And if you want transformational companies, you got to imagine yourself running a transformational company. I think part of it, because capital has been sparse, people are building companies to sell them rather than building companies to create transformational companies, right? Shooting for the moon, so raising ambition is super important. I do think this is about promoting diversity, and I think the diversity of Southern California is our secret weapon. The diversity of people in this room, the diversity of thought, diversity of culture, diversity of industry is probably nowhere better in the world than Southern California. So the challenge for us is to think about that diversity as an asset and how do we harness it to create an engine of innovation that can be second to none. Okay, so that's a call to action on that. Tech nodes, we're going to talk about building nodes. Connectivity, so we understand we're distributed, but we can't all work alone. And then our capabilities are nothing but extraordinary. Next slide, please. So that's the data set. Are you all still awake? Good, I'm glad. So I'm going to turn it up to Eric to talk about, given that opportunity, what can you be doing here? A little bit of what's going on in Glendale and Burbank, but how do you take those assets and how do you put those ingredients together to make that beautiful cake and start building that mosaic? So Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Andy. I'm really excited to be part of this effort at the Alliance. I think we have an audacious goal, but we have, as you just saw, a lot of the building blocks that can make us really successful. But Southern California is a large place, and we want to make it more competitive, but how do we do it? We're going to do it at the ecosystem level in the communities like Burbank. Next slide. So we really dug into Southern California with BCG, did the analysis, and uncovered innovation clusters or nodes across 6 counties. And then we did an inventory about what are the assets that each of these nodes really have. We have a huge concentration in LA County, as you might expect. We're, with 10 million people, it's the largest and most populated county, and we've got a lot of the building blocks here. Next slide. When we inventoried these different nodes, what emerged are 4 archetypes. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time going through these, and then also talking about where Burbank fits on this. So we have mature nodes. We're fortunate to have Silicon Beaches that have gained a level of notoriety. They've had large exits like Snap or big venture rounds with companies like Bird that have really elevated the Southern California innovation ecosystem. We want to shine a light on that. We want to assist where we can. But there's a lot of things that are happening, and it has a lot of momentum, and those are worth celebrating. Just to note, in addition to Silicon Beach, San Diego has a lot of activity, particularly in life sciences. West LA and Culver City are other cities that have a lot of activity. Let me turn to blossoming nodes. So these are the communities that have a lot of the ingredients, but they need a boost. They've got entrepreneurs, but they're not getting the size rounds that we'd like to see. And they're still trying to kind of figure out some of the bigger pieces. So some of these communities include nearby Pasadena, downtown Los Angeles, which really jumped out when we analyzed the data as being ripe for kind of rising to a more mature level, like Silicon Beach. But also West Hollywood, South Bay, and North County, San Diego are other blossoming nodes. Next, we identified talent anchors. So these are areas that pump out a lot of university students, a lot of STEM talent. These are the building blocks for innovative companies. And some of these include Santa Barbara, Claremont, and Riverside, which Andy just mentioned. They have a lot of university talent, but they need some help creating the ecosystem. They might lack anchor companies or other things that kind of make it a vibrant ecosystem. And then finally, we found that there's corporate anchors, and these are crucial for helping an innovative ecosystem thrive. They can help. They could help support early stage research. They could potentially buy out successful research, but they also have a vested interest in their communities, and they have a vested interest in a deep talent pool. They want to keep local talent here, and so they want to see, they have a vested interest. And so that's a huge asset, and frankly, one that we don't have enough in Southern California. In Burbank, however, we're really lucky to have that. And so we've got Disney, we've got Warner Brothers, we've got other large anchor companies that have and are interested in really seeing a more vibrant entrepreneurial landscape and are willing to kind of step forward. Next slide. So as we dig into these, look at the columns at the top, and then I'm going to really focus on Burbank and Glendale, which we group together as a distinct cluster that has this strong corporate anchor. So I'm looking at the bottom line on the slide here. So for startup culture, there's 9 startups here in this region. Service Titan in nearby Glendale is one of the leading ones. Not a huge number of startups here, but we think that with some work we could raise that number. We have 2 universities. Woodbury, which I know is a sponsor today, is a great university right here in Burbank, and then we have Glendale Community College right next door. But Glendale and Burbank might also need to recruit talent or create ties to other academic institutions to create enough of a talent pipeline to attract more companies and give them the ingredients for success. There's a lot of tech workers here, or there's quite a few, but the real advantage for Burbank is the corporate anchors. So we've got at least one company. We've got Disney. We talked a little bit about Warner Brothers is here, but it doesn't show up as a headquartered company. But the big thing that I think Burbank needs is more work on the investment piece, and Andy mentioned that. We need to attract more investment here, particularly on the later stage. Next slide, please. So we really did a deep dive and tried to inventory the assets in Burbank and Glendale. And the headline here is that we have good access in companies, but too few investors. And we could spend some time on this, or we'll share this after for those that are interested, and you could do a deeper dive. But we know a lot of the good things that are going here, and we also, through this exercise, know some of the areas to focus on. Next slide. So we've got great companies. We talked about Disney and Warner Brothers. They're already doing things in innovation. We want to help support them and leverage our board members to try to give a boost. But some of the big assets we have in this region is our airport, which I think is the best regional airport in the country. It's one of the only airports it's fun to fly out of. But that's huge. There's frequent flights up to Silicon Valley if you need to still run up there to go raise capital. You could get to a lot of places you needed to go. So. It makes the region more navigable. Opportunity areas, I talked a little bit about universities. We've got a lot of university-anchored communities nearby, so we could leverage more talent to make Burbank a stronger innovation ecosystem. And then just, again, we've got angel investors, but we need, and we've got some accelerators. I think this actually undercounts the number of accelerators and incubators that might be in the region. But we've got some support network, but we want to, as a community, try to grow that out. Next slide, please. So at the Alliance for Southern California Innovation, we're very focused on the founder's journey, and this comes out of Brad Feld's work on innovation communities, he's on our board. We're lucky to have their leadership, but when BCG did their 100 interviews and really analyzed what was going on in the ecosystem, they uncovered a number of friction points on this journey. So there's a lot of stakeholders that are helping the founders on their journeys. People at universities are obviously important. Investors, large companies, and community and government are key partners as well, and they each play a distinct role in the entrepreneur's journey. But we wanted to really find out what are these frictions and what are the strategies to overcome them so we could help communities like Burbank overcome them and advance to the next level. Next slide. So those frictions come down to about 5 different kind of macro issues. Capital, getting access to capital, particularly late stage, it was a key friction identified as an issue that we need to overcome here in Burbank. Talent, we need to improve the talent pipeline for entrepreneurs, and this is both the worker bees, the people that do the work, that have the skill sets, but also the managerial teams that really know how to run and scale organizations. Trying to overcome the isolation geographically in Southern California, but also between sectors. Sometimes certain sectors, whether it's entertainment or tech, might not interact with their peers in other industries, but that is a key ingredient for innovation. Being able to have conversations and learn from the problems solved in other industries can really help you break through. So trying to bridge that isolation was another friction point. Navigation, trying to find out where are the resources, where to go, where to find help. So with BCG, we were able to inventory a lot of the assets here. You in this room know a lot of your local assets probably better than we do, and so we could learn a lot from that, but I think together we could really help entrepreneurs be able to find answers faster to solve their problems. And then the last one is sociology or culture, this culture of risk-taking and supporting entrepreneurs around that, or also having the institutions that support entrepreneurs be able to solve the problems at the time scale or at the pace that entrepreneurs need to solve their problems. Next slide. So we came up with a huge catalog of potential strategies, and this is really the exciting part. So this is, again, a starting point, but it's quite a healthy starting point to try to figure out how do we solve these frictions. So you know, the incubators, the accelerators, they're really important for creating vibrant communities where these collisions between entrepreneurs can happen and really breakthrough learning. But we have to identify the ones as a community that will solve the problems that we're experiencing right here in Burbank. Next slide. So again, BCG did 100 interviews and learned a lot. You know, some of these were right here in Burbank or adjacent communities, and you'll see some of them here. But we moved from the point of friction to try to come up with what is the answer. So one of the key frictions was lack of involvement or coordination between community and government. One way to solve that is to maintain a directory of resources here. And so if you know where to go to find answers, that is a step in the right direction. You still need to have those conversations. And so that's something that we as a community could talk about doing, like what the best way to do that. And then another challenge is corporations are seldomly involved with the innovation communities. Some companies really want to get involved. They see it in their interest, and we want to advance that and try to find ways to support the large company's mission, but also give back to the entrepreneurial community. Next slide. So these are specific strategies for Glendale or Burbank. These nodes right here, and again, this is a starting point, but this is leveraging the corporate assets we have here. I think what we're looking to do is really trying to find who are the partners in the community that want to support entrepreneurs, and how do we develop the right strategies and then put those ideas into action. Next slide. So this brings me to, I think, what we've identified as the key ingredient from transforming an innovation ecosystem that has a lot of potential, has a lot of the building blocks that can make it be successful, and put those things into action. So what we've identified is a node champion is instrumental, and we actually need more than one node champion. We need multiple node champions. And these node champions are people who care deeply about the innovation ecosystem, have the time and motivation to play a leadership role. So we can't depend upon the founder who's bootstrapping its company and trying to survive. And we also you know, there's some people that are free to give time. The entrepreneurs might be limited, but somebody has enough experience that can really try to connect the dots in the community in which they live is a key. Next slide. So what are we looking for? And this is really the call to action that I want to extend in this room is If you know of people who could be good champions, we want to hear from them, we want to talk to them, and start working at the community level. So if you're a champion or know somebody that would be a good one, let us know. Who is a good champion? Well, we've tried to take a look at what would be the key ingredient based on some of the learnings we've had. Ideally, they come from different places. So you might get somebody from that's a community advocate working in the accelerator incubator community. Somebody from government who maybe works in economic development. Also local experienced entrepreneurs who could really reflect upon the personal frictions that they've had and have a vested interest in trying to remove those on behalf of the community. Investors obviously are key as well. And corporate representatives, which we have a lot here to draw upon in Glendale. So again, if you know of anybody or you yourself are interested in this and want to start working with you, we want to start putting together a committee or a champion board to start doing this work here locally, because that's really where the work needs to happen. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Andy, where he's going to talk about Pasadena and some of the great things that have happened there as one case study. And so without further ado, thank you for your time. Andy?
So after some arm twisting, Tom did agree to let me talk about Pasadena at a Burbank event. And the only reason I want to do this is, like, the materials, what we laid out was a roadmap. And roadmaps are only as interesting as people who want to go on the journey. And I think, Tom, a little about the Innovate Pasadena story is one of those things that, as an entrepreneur, the community of innovators in Pasadena had kind of vanished as a result of the Great Recession. And I started commuting to Santa Monica to be part of an innovation community that was only 23 miles away, but might as well have been around the world. And I got very upset about that. And I was building an analytics company focused on an area called CRM. And when I got to Santa Monica, it was a bunch of, I would say, younger people working on entertainment, content, and media. And so after all that effort, I was in the wrong community. And I remember driving back on the lovely 10 freeway and thinking about those people in Pasadena to get their I better stop, their act together. And my first stop was the Pasadena Chamber of Commerce. And I met with Paul Little. I don't know if Paul Little's here today. And I said, Paul, I would love to work with you in your chamber to help activate the innovation community and organize a leadership group. And he gave me a membership application and said, come to our next breakfast. And so I recommend that's probably not the best way to activate a leadership group around innovation. So I know if it's a chamber or whoever else, I can tell you that. So we've created a separate group. And I want to tell you a little bit about that story in the hopes that maybe it creates some interest here for people to get organized. So Innovate Pasadena, I'm no longer involved, but I did help start this because of that very terrible drive to Santa Monica. Next slide. So part of this is do your inventory about what's extraordinary around your community. In Pasadena, we have a lot of research and nerdy people who create patents and win prizes. You are sitting in the media content hub of probably the world. And I would think that you identify yourself around those strengths that are compelling. So this is kind of some of the inventory work that we did. I know the mayor's here. We did get a $5,000 grant to do planning around this. I can tell you today we are offering to help work with whatever group you decide. If you decide to get motivated to get organized, we're happy to share lots of best practices and information to guide you along the journey. But this is a journey you must decide to take yourself first, okay? But figure out what you have. What is the platform you are working off of? Next slide. So a lot of great stuff. Once again, find your story. And it goes back to what I was telling you about Southern California. We are a network of communities that have amazing stories. Find the Burbank story. And I think you're filled with the best storytellers in the world at the Walt Disney Company and Warner Brothers and the media community that's right in your backyard. So I certainly hope you can find a great story and probably do one hell of a job telling it. Next slide. Okay, keep going. This is kind of our assessment. I'm going to keep flipping to the next slide. So what was the mission? It was really just about activating the innovation resources to build a community of innovators. And if you read anything around building of innovation communities, Brad Feld's book, there's a professor out of Harvard who does clustering. You have to identify what makes you unique. And first of all, you have to declare that yourself. If you don't know what makes you special, no one else outside of the room will know what makes you special. So figure out what your story is, and then start enlisting others to build your innovation ecosystem. And so that was a process we went through in Pasadena, and this became our mantra, and it could be pretty generic, right? You could substitute Burbank into this phrase as well. Next slide. We pulled lots of constituents together. So I remember when we were starting this, I met with the president of Caltech, I met with the CEO of Art Center College of Design, and I met with the corporate players in town and 10 startup entrepreneurs. And interesting, none of those people really thought of themselves as a community. And I said, do we think we can be better if we think of ourselves as a community that works together? And they all said yes, and that became the basis of pulling all these pieces together. It is a not-for-profit, I should say. It is funded by corporates mostly, and people who are committed to economic vibrancy in their own community. Next slide. There you go. It's a not-for-profit, 27-person board, 20 sponsors. And what's interesting, if you go to the next slide, so it's about creating connectivity. And what we found in the world of nerdy people, they rather spend their time in a laboratory than engaging with other people. And if you want to build a community, you must know other people. And so we're like, well, how about if we do mixers? They said, I hate mixers. You tell engineers to go to mixers, they rather, they'll fly out of the country and run for a safe haven. So what we did was decided that let's do educational events and build in the mixer into the event. So we're going to learn about, AI, or we're going to learn about blockchain, and all the people who are interested in education, nerdy people, came out and we built in the network into it, and guess what? We started building a community. So it's important to understand the nature of who your audience is as you start building your activation strategy. So we're a bit subversive in terms of using education to create connectivity. Next slide. So people, companies, and capital, probably things that you'd want to think about here as well. Next slide. So we've been at it 6 years. Innovate Pasadena has done 800 events and connected over 85,000 people in this part of Los Angeles. And that's nice. What I'm asking, and what you're probably asking is, isn't that great? Think of all those friendships, those relationships. But what has the impact been? Right? What is the benefit? Next slide. Next slide. Make your impact. So let's talk about that. So a few metrics I'll point to. When we started Innovate Pasadena, there wasn't a single square foot of co-working space in Pasadena. Okay, now there's 5 co-working spaces. We have over 100,000 square feet of co-working space. You go to those spaces, and I think there's a WeWork in Burbank, am I correct? And I noticed the new co-working space up the street. You need a place where people can connect and share ideas. Innovation happens with one person, infecting another person with their idea and infecting somebody else, and there needs to be a place where that can happen. I know that's part of the mission, I suspect, of the Chamber, is creating that connectivity. But co-working is a really important ingredient. We had only the Pasadena Angels based in Pasadena. We now have 5 new venture funds that manage $300 million of capital, right? And the other thing we found out is when we did an inventory of companies when we started, people who were living in Pasadena, running companies in Pasadena, listed Los Angeles as their address. Because they felt it put them on the defensive to say, why the heck would you have an innovation company in Pasadena? Nothing's going on in Pasadena, that's where the Rose Bowl is. So you have to enable people and kind of liberate them to be part of your local narrative, right? Unless you tell the narrative and give them the backstop of why it's great to build a content VR interactive company in Burbank, they're going to say they're probably somewhere else. Actually, Burbank has a great advantage because people already think about that, right? So let's think about who are those companies who want to be affiliated here. So venture funds have been kind of prolific. Next slide. And if you look at venture funding, so we started in 2012. There were 6 venture capital rounds done in 2012. Last year, 16 venture capital rounds were done in Pasadena, okay? And $15 million was put to work in 2012. Last year, $144 million of capital went to work in Pasadena. We just ran the numbers. There's now 1,600 innovation jobs that didn't exist that are a result of innovation companies, venture-backed companies, who said a key driver was the fact that they wanted to be part of an innovation community, okay? Next slide. So, hopefully, Tom, that was okay. It wasn't too much of a commercial. Some words of wisdom. Be reflective. Tell your story, right? Your story, you have to believe that you have something that's worth telling. Be authentic. Don't try to be everything to everybody, right? And I think you're in a community where there's a lot of great stories to be told. And once you have that story, you need to amplify that and figure out who cares about that story. And people will start affiliating to what's going on. So I was meeting with the CIO at Disney, and I think we have someone from Disney on a panel next, right? Someone's here. Someone back here, great. You're relaunching your accelerator, right? They're reinvigorating the Disney accelerator. That's a huge asset to your community. That's not just Disney project, that's a project that I think the community should latch on to, should challenge Warner Brothers to do something similar, right? And you think about creating that innovation ecosystem, it creates a multiplier effect. Look for those multiplier effects. I'd say authenticity, Eric spoke about it. This is not something that happens overnight. As much as I'm a part-time political person myself, politicians come and go. This needs to be part of who your community is for the long term. Like if you're really going to build an innovation community, you need to decide it's an important part. It's foundational to who you are and who you want to be. So you need to engage people beyond the electeds who come and go. It needs to be a portfolio of stakeholders who care and who actually want to make a difference. And where our invitation to you is that we will follow Tom's lead, the mayor's lead. All we do is think about building innovation communities. We're here to help you navigate that new adventure. And the good news is we have lots of success stories, and we certainly have the fortunate and extraordinary work of BCG that we're happy to share in its full regalia. You probably got more than you wanted today, but the point was to tease and whet your appetite to say that there is lots of know-how, that if there's a willingness to engage, we are more than willing to share it. So thank you for giving us the opportunity. It's great to be here. Thank you, Tom.
Well, thank you, Andy and Eric, and I have to admit, I'm glad you twisted my arm. Very thorough and informative presentation, and I encourage any of you or all of you to get a copy of the study and read it, because there's another aspect to it also. It gives you hope in the future. You go, wow, this is within our grasp. And we can accomplish this if we work together. Plus, you're going to get educated. I'll bet most of you in the room don't know what VR and AR is. Well, I learned what it is. It's augmented and virtual reality. And I also know there's another one, mixed reality. And I know there's things like robotics. I'm even seeing that on TV now. There's a commercial on TV, and the guy introduces himself, well, I'm a robot, but I know a lot about this product, and I'm going to tell you why. And then they have human beings come on and say, well, what does he know? He's a robot. But anyway, there are, for me, in reading the report, and I'm sure there are going to be more, but my first go around and I spent quite a bit of time with it, there are 4 takeaways for Burbank in this study. 1, Burbank anchors one of the 8 technology nodes of excellence in the Southern Cal region for content creation in media and entertainment sectors. The study itself says, quote, the SoCal region's greatest strength has always been content creation. So we're sitting on a wonderful opportunity. We're going to hear more about that in the panel. But just as important, too, there are 4 other strong Burbank job clusters, in my judgment: healthcare, believe it or not, aerospace, advanced manufacturing, and professional, technical, and scientific services, which cover a lot of these nodes of excellence. And they are also in tech nodes in some of the other tech nodes in the study. And we're going to hear later from an employer who's in one of those sectors, an advertising firm. And then, so for me, having our 5 top job clusters identified in this study is important, because it means we have a diverse job base, which is important to our future, because we can never take any employer for granted. And we learned that lesson 30 years ago when Lockheed, our largest employer, taxpayer, and property owner, moved to Georgia. And this happened when I was mayor, too. So anyway, I want to move on as we transition now to what the city of Burbank has done and is doing to support local technology companies. And for that, I want to introduce Mayor Emily Gabel-Luddy.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for that introduction. I grew up in an era when Dick Tracy had his two-way wrist rate watch. Remember that? So here we are today. I'd like to bring this home a bit to our Burbank community, and I want to thank Barbara, Andy, and Eric for laying the groundwork from the global perspective to the more regional perspective. And of course, I want to welcome you all to this annual, what will become the annual Economic Summit, here sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce in Burbank in beautiful Ikea. And my remarks really are a reflection of what I think of as the city and our council working together, because frankly, Burbank is also a transformational company. It has different orientation because it's government, but nonetheless, I think what we've sought to do over the last many years is become transformational in our outlook and in our actions as a city. Burbank, as you know, has a competitive environment that attracts businesses because it has excellent city services, it has no city income tax, and no gross sales receipt tax. And for those of you who may be our guests, our community voted with over 63% in support for a sales tax measure that places us on financial stability footing from henceforth going out for several decades, both to address the infrastructure issues in our community as well as continuing the challenge of paying pensions. So we have put ourselves on strong financial footing as a result of those community actions. We have an overall workforce of about 154,000, and that's measured against a population of 105,000. So we are a net importer of individuals during the day, sometimes to the vexing issues of our community seeing so much traffic. And making the trip to Santa Monica, my sympathies are with you. I'm glad you found a place, where is he? Here in Pasadena, so you no longer have to make that trip. But that's sort of the numbers underneath some of the challenges that we face. We have an investment called One Burbank. As you know, this is out of our utility. And One Burbank was the installation of a high-speed fiber optic broadband network that has completely favored the growth of the entertainment industry in Burbank. So the steps that we've taken as a municipal agency have been in support of Disney and Warner Brothers and Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and all the pre- and post-production activities, including translation and dubbing and CMGI, that helps keep this the media capital of the world. In addition, I know that there was a mention of the flex and creative workspaces. Burbank now has WeWork, Common Ground, Museroom, and My Other Office. And in addition to that, we continue to host monthly entrepreneurial networking events called Burbank Tech Talks. So this summit couldn't come at a more opportune time. The Tech Talks have been led by a lineup of professionals. The recent topics, including the one yesterday, which was women in entrepreneurship. And I'm pleased to hear and see so much gender equality in the room this morning, because this is something, I'm going to step off my notes for a minute, that Silicon Valley never really got, and San Francisco never really got. And we should be able to get that right here in our community of Burbank, Glendale, and Southern California in an innovative way that cultivates the continued participation of women entrepreneurs in these innovations. Next, thank you. Thank you. I've never gotten applause before. We have a new program called the Startup Burbank Pitch Fest, which allows startups to pitch their ideas to a panel of investors. The top 3 winners, Zygo, Leaf, and CreativeBot, received a total combined prizes from Google Cloud worth up to $140,000. We're on it. Another component, which I know very few of you know about, but this is doubly exciting for those of us on council, is the tech ecosystem that has been developed, which has resulted in the development of a makerspace in partnership with the Burbank Library. The space will feature 3D printers, cameras, and animation tools to directly support learning in fields relevant to the media industry. In addition, Burbank's landscape, of course, as you know, will change with Warner Brothers' acquisition of the Burbank Studios and the development of 800,000 square feet of a Frank Gehry-designed iceberg tower known as the Second Century Project. This acquisition is one of Burbank's largest real estate transactions ever, and it has an estimated value of over $1 billion. Construction is expected to begin in the fall and complete in 2023. Again, great timing. Burbank's own Providence St. Joseph Medical Center's recently proposed emergency room and urgent care project include a new 34,000 square foot emergency department and an 8,500 square foot urgent care center, along with numerous other improvements and upgrades that will continue to support our growing healthcare tech sector. With more than 4,000 healthcare jobs, Burbank is at the forefront of research and development in medical technology, pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and related health fields. Retaining this vital and growing industry, and we know it will because we have an aging population, adds to Burbank's diversified base and increases the potential for cross-pollination in these emerging industries. The airport district near our much beloved Burbank Airport, where you can still get off at the back of the plane, and you will be able to do that in the future with our new terminal. We are evolving as industrial and manufacturing companies have transitioned to entertainment and tech companies, and they now include iMagic, ColorEdge, and NGE Gaming. Having a dedicated airport with daily direct flights to and from the Bay Area allows Silicon Valley executives to commute with convenient one-hour trip, solidifying that interdependence of internet technology, entertainment, and media. Aviom Burbank, recently approved by the council, is located adjacent to the site of the new terminal. It's an industrial flex creative office space project that was recently approved by us. Aviom will add more than 1 million square feet of industrial space, as well as 143,000 square feet of creative office buildings throughout. With the growth and evolution Burbank is experiencing in terms of jobs and development, we still have yet to meet our goals to increase housing for our workforce population. This has become a top priority of the council. We recently approved a goal of an additional 12,000 dwelling units over the next 15 years. And for those of us who are in council on a weekly basis, we know that the housing issue is significant and it's durable. We need to find a durable answer to that and continue to support the communities who are here already, as well as new populations wanting to move into the community of Burbank. We are the media capital of the world, and we're at the forefront of innovation and technology. One example of this is Disney's innovation lab called Studio Lab, where storytellers from Marvel, Pixar, and Lucasfilm are combining their brainpower to create cutting-edge technology to take filmmaking to the next level. Another example of this is Burbank-based Hydra Electric, an innovator and tech pioneer in the aerospace industry who will be announcing their new high-performance sensor and switch solutions to the world's largest aerospace tech trade show in Paris next month. I'm very excited about our continued growth and development. I am so pleased to be part of this morning, and I'm going to look forward to the panel. Thank you for attending today's summit. A big thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for coordinating this event, and I'd leave you with these final thoughts. This city has always been a city of civic culture. So as we go forward with innovation, technology, and modernization in a way that sets aside the old wrist two-way wrist radio of 60 years ago. Let's remember that our young entrepreneurs also need to be integrated into our community of culture so that we understand and continue to participate. It's one of the things that makes Burbank ultimately a most successful city. I thank you all this morning and look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And having attended yesterday's Tech Talk on women in technology, I want to say publicly, I endorse your gender equality position, certainly. And I also want to congratulate the city on recognizing the importance of the municipal fiber optic network as infrastructure for tomorrow's companies. In the 21st century, the movement of information, images, conversations, God knows what else, is every bit as important as the movement of people and goods on our transportation systems today. So now we're going to hear from the people doing the actual work, the people who are engaged, the people in companies and employers who are engaged in bringing this technology to Burbank now. And we just haven't maybe heard as much about it as we should have. And with that, I'm going to introduce David Knight, Burbank Chamber Board member and president of Angel City Data. He's going to be the moderator. He'll introduce the panel to you. And as I want the panel to come up, and as he do, I'm going to invite Flash from Hollywood Sound, there he is, to relocate the podium and the microphone.
Good morning, everybody. So let's get the panel members up here. I think everybody knows their seats. I think Evan is sitting there. You're second to the last, sorry. We got Max, Evan, Christine, and then Pam. First and foremost, show of hands for everybody that's here right now. Show of hands. How many people are thankful they didn't have to order pancakes in Sweden today? Swedish, right? That's a good thing. Hi, Christine. You can just put this right here, and I'll probably stand and walk around a little bit. Thanks. Everybody mic'd up? Everybody on? Everybody hot? Again, thank you for being here today. I think we've seen some really good demographics and information, some numbers. It gives us a little bit of a compass on how to point our community and our ecosystems in alignment with where the future is going. I'm very thrilled to have the panel here. Hopefully this is going to work. I think it is. Let's see. I think I went too far. We're going to try that one more time. Can you back me up one slide? Oh, there we go. I got it from here. So just quick about me. I'm Dave Knight, a longtime Burbank resident. I'm the president and owner of Angel City Data. We do custom business applications, mobile, web, desktop, et cetera, et cetera. We've won a number of awards for our designs, our business savvy, our technical support. 2017, fortunate to be the Burbank Small Business of the Year, awarded by the city and the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you. And as Tom alluded, I'm one of the Burbank Chamber of Board members, so I'm part of the community that helps kind of stir the environment for good business productivity. I want to announce our panel. We're going to work our way from left to right. The first of our panelists, and the one with the coolest picture, is Max Lopez from Apartment D Animation.
How's it going, everybody?
They do a lot of really great stuff. He's an executive and a partner at the organization. They do a lot of stop motion, traditional. He's worked on a lot of great projects here, as you can see, Anomalisa, and Tumbleleaf, many Emmy Awards. they've got a very strong visual presence of their organization, tens of millions of views on YouTube for their content. So they do some pretty killer stuff. You should look it up on YouTube and get a good look at that. Max is also, there's a really great organization in town, the Burbank Young Professionals Group. Max is one of the co-chairs of that. Super vibrant, super entrepreneurial focused. If you've got a young, up-and-coming business in town, you're going to want to grab Max or any of the people that he's associated with. They put on great events. Next on our panel, we've got Evan. Evan is from Petrol Advertising, Evan Rogers. He's been there for a lot of years. For those of you who don't know Petrol, they are a significant advertising organization in Burbank. Anything in the video game industry, these guys rock. They know what they're doing, and they help a lot of the largest brand names in the world of video games succeed in getting their messages out there. Evan, senior producer, visual identity. Been with the gaming industry for 10 years, Call of Duty. Some of these titles are just like otherworldly in terms of their popularity and so forth, and you guys really kind of led the charge in terms of some of the global initialization of some of the messaging and the branding and the advertising around those. He's sort of a convergent piece at Petrol with respect to creativity, innovation, and tech, and kind of pulls all those strings together for the organization and helps lead them in that direction. And then obviously you can see AR, VR, and photogrammetry are areas of specialty. We're going to have Evan tell us what photogrammetry is. I know what that is, but you don't. But we're going to have some fun with that in a minute. From St. Joseph's, we are fortunate to have Christine. Christine is Rodriguez. She has been in the medical industry for a lot of years in Southern California. She's Director of Strategy and Business Development. She's got formerly Cedars-Sinai, Dignity Health. She's sort of one of these people at St. Joe's to make sure they have the correct blend of capabilities, services, and providers that are going to serve the community appropriately. So she's sort of a key strategy piece for that entire organization. Next up, we've got Matthew Duell from Walt Disney Studios, Director of Innovation Partnerships and Business Development. He had by far the longest title of anybody on the panel here today. So he helps foster innovation partners, works with other organizations within the Disney ecosystem to help pull together good key strategies using technology, creativity, and good partnerships. 20 years in the media and telecom industry, formerly with Sprint, Virgin Mobile, et cetera. And again, he pulls in a lot of the more high-tech thing. One of the interesting things I think you're going to see is two of the big creative stalwarts of the Burbank community, very heavily into vehicles, 5G, augmented reality, AR, VR, et cetera. So we're going to see some conversations about that. And finally, from Warner Brothers, we are thrilled to have, clicker working? We have Pam Allison from Warner Brothers Technology Group. She's an Executive Director of Digital Partnerships. Key focuses, can you back me up one slide again, sorry? She's formerly, this is the coolest thing. She's formerly with the National Hot Rod Association, so I think that rocks. I think that's really amazing. She's also done tours with Disney, DirecTV, MovieLink. She's also got just a mind-numbingly amazing resume with respect to her education. She's got mechanical engineering degree, management engineering, computer sciences, and an MBA. So this woman knows how to talk tech and business in the same conversation. So we're really thrilled to have you. So we're going to go to our panel slide, and then I'm going to kind of just run through some questions here for the team, and I want to kind of hear some thoughts along the way, a little bit of interaction. Can you take me to the next slide, please? There we go. So one of the first questions I have for the panel, and I want to kind of just run this through, is what's the single best thing you see coming for the future of your industry, whether it's technical or otherwise? Max.
So I think really what's done a lot for media is social media. As media is reaching more people globally, we need access to new creatives, more diverse creatives. And I think finding that talent has traditionally been a challenge, but now rather than gatekeepers having to trickle down and find talent, talent is having the opportunity to put themselves on platforms and make themselves available and discoverable. YouTube has really been a big opportunity. but I think also, I mean, even, you know, people are beginning to use social media in ways that were not even necessarily the intended purpose. And so the people who are defining how that media is used are the people who are kind of innovating communication and innovating the way that we are accessing and consuming media. So I think that has kind of opened the door for everybody.
Nice. And do you, Max, do you feel that we're sort of at the infancy, we're at the adolescent years?
I think we're at the infancy.
Wow.
I mean, if you think like, what I love, the like saying I always love is that the Industrial Revolution existed for 100+ years before we even had the assembly line, which really unlocked the potential of it. So we are only, I mean, we're at the infancy of the internet as a whole, let alone social media and the connectivity it brings.
Nice. Evan, what are some of the, again, the single best thing you see in the future coming for your industry?
Yeah, I think gaming is just booming right now, so it's been kind of difficult to kind of hone in on what's going to be the biggest thing. You know, we've had a lot of talk about 5G coming, and I think the largest thing coming for our industry right now is going to be streaming, whether that's live broadcasting, similar to social media, whether that's esports coming more to bear in the way we stream, or that's in streaming gameplay, or what we're calling cloud gaming now, where basically Google's leading the way with what's called Stadia, and we're going to start to see moving away from, you know, basically you would have the Netflix of gaming, where you'd be able to bring in your gaming content straight from the cloud and be able to play sans a PC, sans a console, you know, be able to have those games at your content at will.
That's what we're seeing, a convergence in the technological future right now. When you look at an Uber, a Lyft, streaming, Disney Plus, Netflix, et cetera, it's on-demand need for what I need. It's on-demand service, and that's really seeming to migrate into the game industry as well. Christine, you've got a unique perspective on the panel. You're coming from the healthcare industry. Where do you see sort of the single best thing coming from the future of your industry?
So I'm going to piggyback off the on-demand. We're seeing that a lot in healthcare as well. For us, it's increasing access points, so providing the care for our community in the areas in which they choose to receive it. So I'll give you a great example. At Providence, we have an app called Express Care Virtual, and it's an app that you could download, and it's a virtual urgent care. And so I've done it before. I'm a working parent, as many of you are in this room. When my kids are sick, to be honest, I don't have time to go to an urgent care and wait hours in a waiting room. It's non-productive. So I could sit on my couch, open the app, talk to a physician on my app, get what I need, get the prescription sent to my local pharmacy, and it's all embedded in my electronic medical record. So it's pretty amazing. Again, this is something that we have now, and it's something that we're going to continue to build upon. You'll also see healthcare operate in different sectors. So thinking outside the walls of the hospital, for example, you'll see healthcare more in retail clinics. You'll see expanded primary care space, expanded urgent care, healthcare at home. So again, it's just creating that on-demand, very user-friendly, different points of access for care.
Again, we're getting convergence again of on-demand ride sharing, on-demand gaming, on-demand medical services. That's really interesting. Matt, what do you see? Single best thing coming for your future of your industry?
So all of these are absolutely fantastic examples. An additional area that I think is incredibly fascinating will be experiencing content. So not just watching it, but having a more personalized way to experience it and really stepping into and engaging a part of the content and the iconic not only stories, but the characters who we all create. And thank you, Mayor, for mentioning the Studio Lab, which is one way that we're trying to grow and expand upon this further. And that is a convergence of a bunch of different technical aspects, not only with 5G, but thinking about virtual reality and artificial intelligence. There's a startup called The Void that I think has some early showings about what it is. I don't know, have any of you tried The Void or? Okay, just a couple of people. It's the ability to actually step in, right? And where you have, I've never been to an experience where early days you had a group of you know, let's call it well-seasoned professionals coming out laughing like 13-year-olds again, right? And it's those type of moments where I think younger generations especially are looking to have those experiences, not just paying for a transaction, but to actually have something that could be not only experienced as an individual, but with my friends and family members. So as if we're taking a trip somewhere else, we're or doing it here somewhere local in the community, but doing it with recognizable characters and characters and stories that I love, and then us being able to have, you know, social and other aspects of that to be able to take that away with us and to have those memories and to have that connection point as we, you know, go through life. So that's really exciting.
That's great. Pam, Warner Brothers, what do you guys see? Biggest excitement coming in the future for you guys?
I mean, it certainly is 5G. We're spending a lot of time. It helps that we're now owned by AT&T as well. So 5G is a big initiative, and it helps bring to life a lot of different things. So like Matt talked about, the immersive entertainment where you can have something like a VR or AR experience in a light headset in order to have this shared experience just about anywhere, starting with places like the Void or Dreamscape, and it could elaborate to places even like where we are at Ikea. Imagine being here and having an immersive experience with your friends. But 5G opens up even a lot of other opportunities, for delivering entertainment and experiences wherever you are, to kind of non-sexy things like how content is made and allowing for efficiencies in production and lowering costs, so you can set up an on-location shoot at a much lower cost and deliver that content back to the studio. So for us, it's a really exciting technology that will be a game changer.
That's well said. Ironically, I was in Mexico last weekend, and in a place where internet access was crippling. And you can't imagine, I couldn't imagine running a business with the inadequacy of just what we take for granted with high-speed internet access as well as we have. We're talking about taking that to another degree with 5G and having it at our disposal almost anywhere, touches a wide variety of industries and helps promote multiple fingers of business support and how it's supported. Max, what's the single biggest challenge you see? We've heard from Alliance. We talk about funding. We talk about the good talent, the geographical diversity of the area that we live in, and so forth. What do you find are some of the challenges for your industry?
I think media production always takes space, and space is always at a premium, only increasingly so as California's had a massive influx of residents. And so it's finding the proper compromise between being in a location like Burbank, where we have, as an animation company, being amidst the greatest animation companies is hugely influential for us. But stop motion specifically, I mean, it's a factory floor kind of industry, and you need the space to have a lot of bodies and a lot of equipment. So walking that fine line, being close to where it's happening, but maybe on the fringe of close to where it's happening, has been our largest challenge, I think.
Right. Again, in the animation world, a lot of people hunker down over workstations, just building frame by frame, et cetera. Stop motion, you guys are shooting models and need variety of angles and cameras and physical space to do that, so that takes elbow room.
Yeah, the compromise, stop motion is kind of the compromise between live action production and animation production. And so we need the space, the office space, the cubicle space to have the pre-production and post-production infrastructure, but then truly, the stages upon stages with 4x8 set pieces, and like you said, the camera room and the elbow room. So that is always kind of like a delicate balancing act. And when we were beginning especially, to fit that in an apartment was definitely a challenge.
Right. Apartment D. Evan, what are your biggest challenges you see for your industry coming forward?
I think one of the biggest challenges that Petrol has been facing is, as the need for content and media is growing, we're looking at new ways we're basically getting similar budgets, and now we're looking to create as many assets as we can to continue to feed the consumer groups that are fans of gaming. And so we need to be very strategic, very forward-thinking in the way we look at solving these problems for our partners. So we're continue looking at new ways to create content, continue looking at new ways that we can basically take the same message and cut it up into different segments for our audience, so that everybody gets to feel like a buy-in on what, say, a game that we're working on or a title that we're working on, so that we can continue to message that across, from hardcore gamers to casual gamers and in between.
Nice. Christine, in the medical industry, what do you see some headwinds, challenges facing?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of narrow down to one thing. I think the obvious one is healthcare policy. You know, in the healthcare industry, it's very fluid. We're constantly changing. So that could create some challenges. I think if we do see a recession down the road, that would also create challenges for us in healthcare. Hospitals operate on a very, very narrow margin. So a decrease in revenue would really hurt us as an industry, and you may see some rural hospitals or some smaller independent hospitals potentially going out of business. The other thing that I think it's important to recognize is the rising pharmaceutical costs don't just affect consumers, but they affect healthcare organizations as a whole. Within Providence, we see this as a big challenge around cost. We want to be a low-cost provider and be a great value in terms of quality as well. So it affects us in terms of cost and supply. So when there are shortages of pharmaceutical sales or pharmaceuticals in the community, you know, that affects our supply. So we really want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community. So one of the great things that our organization has done is we've partnered with 7 health systems nationally to create a not-for-profit pharmaceutical company really to address those issues. So I think if I could just say, I mean, I know Burbank knows this as Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, but we're part of a larger health system called Providence, and we have 51 hospitals across the country, over 120,000 employees, 2,200 of those are here local in Burbank. But really what that means to this community is we could leverage our size and our expertise and our experience around those areas. And that stuff really gets funneled down here to Burbank. And it's something that we should all be proud of as a community.
That's well said. You know, an interesting thing also about your industry, I mean, compared to the rest of the panel members, you are driven by a regulation-driven industry. Max doesn't have regulations on stop motion at all. They can move within a wide variety of parameters. You, with each administration change, with each new gavel swing, there can be new regulations that all of a sudden dictate new regulations and so on and so forth. So that's a bigger challenge than a lot of organizations have to face. Matt, what do you see key challenges moving forward?
I think Alliance actually nailed quite a few of them, one of which in particular is talent. We have so many more, not only just companies creating content, but you know, we have a lot of technology companies who are embarking upon this new space as well. I mean, talk about the migration of Silicon Valley to Silicon Beach. I have the opposite challenge. I live in Playa Vista and commute to Burbank every day, right? So fortunately, my daughter keeps me, you know, we are able to take advantage of the Diamond Lane at least on the 405. But, you know, you have in Culver City, you've got the Amazons of the world, right? You've got Apple, you have so many of these traditional technology companies who are just attracting talent. You've got Netflix, all of the, companies who we're used to. So not only from the creative aspect, but as well specifically working in the technology innovation group for the studios, there are engineers. And, you know, we aren't known for, having tech chops within the studios. And that's for us something that we're really trying to, I think, grow in that area. And I just see as more competition comes into the industry, it's going to be great for all, especially for consumers. But for those of us who are, really need our knowledge capital to create content and to create innovative solutions to not only make and market, but deliver and have consumers experience them, it's going to be incredibly challenging, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years.
I was talking with a group a short time ago. There's a new world order, if you haven't noticed. There's General Motors, who's been making cars for 100 years, and they're trying to go electric. And there's brand new companies that are tech companies, Tesla, that is building electric cars. You've got Amazon, who came out of nowhere to command retail, and then Sears and Roebuck, brick and mortar for over 100 years. We've got these two different sort of ecosystems right now, and one of the things that I say about Southern California, in Burbank, Warner Brothers, Disney, et cetera. We've got content creators that have been around for dozens of generations, and then you go to the West Side, you've got Hulu and Google and sort of these new tech companies, and Netflix is one of them. These are tech companies that are building up content, and then over here we've got content companies that are starting to build up their tech, and it's a really interesting sort of divergence, and there's acquisitions and other things that come into play, but these are two different worlds, like the automobile industry, like the retail industry. These are two different worlds that are kind of colliding, a little bit of the new and a little bit of the old, and how do they merge together or live in that common space?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think that with the technology, more and more it's become apparent that in order to drive adoption of more advanced technology, you need to fill it. And what do you fill it with? With amazing content and experiences and stories, right? To keep the families entertained when that autonomous vehicle is driving from, you know, Playa Vista to Burbank, and all of the other factors that you mentioned. There are all so many aspects where content will touch it, and yes, we will have many more startups to come, which will completely blow apart business models, and it will take those of us who are, you know, been at Burbank, I think 1940s was when we were established here, so we're gonna have to continue to stay, you know, on our toes and try to figure out how we can compete and stay ahead.
I think it's good for the industry. I think it's great for these established businesses to be pushed in a technological change while the upstarts are kind of challenging and trying to play the newer version of that. I think it's really good for the industry, though. Pam, what are some key challenges for you?
Yeah, I mean, we have very similar ones, especially with, you know, talent and, you know, new technology and new content forms. If we look at the other side of it and look at consumers, our challenge is making sure we can continue to get to those consumers. There's so much content out there today. I mean, we're both lucky. We work for really great brands that resonate with consumers. But there's a lot out there, and consumers are very demanding. They expect content whenever they want, wherever they want. There's new places that they're starting to think about where they have content. But of course, there's only so much time in the day. We're really seeing a rise in gaming, which is affecting, you know, our video content. You know, we're lucky we own several game studios, and, you know, that's an area that we have to start to invest in and really think about, and creating experiences to where the consumers are going.
So another question, one of the things that was brought up by Alliance, we talked about the human capital. You know, how do we've got some advantages in Southern California and so forth. I want to kind of ask all of you, you know, with respect to, you know, your staff, your hiring, your outsourcing and so forth, you know, how do you see Burbank and the surrounding area in terms of the quality of candidates? Are we using full-time, part-time outsourcing? There's a lot of the gig economy that's entered Southern California in the production spaces and other. So I just want to kind of, what's the staffing like? What's the quality of candidates? What do you see in terms of the human capital of Southern California with respect to your business? Max?
Well, I think artists were a little bit ahead of the curve on the gig economy. The gig economy leveled a lot of playing fields, and I think it reshaped industries into a form of employment that people were not necessarily accustomed to. But for artists, they've always been freelance. They've always lived in a gig economy. And so it's not so much that